Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube. Today we are delving into a foreign film. We're moving into French foreign territory, talking about a movie called Passages. Now, there's not a lot that I knew about this movie going into it, other than the fact that after it was acquired by Mubi, who has done a lot of different international film programming and releasing, the film was given an NC-17 rating. Now, NC-17 rating is always one that I think is kind of an interesting one. Maybe not because it doesn't always deserve it sometimes, but it just this goes into broader issues with the Motion Pictures Association and Alliance. I forget what the other A is, but the MPAA, who gives a movie a PG, PG-13, rated R. They're not great at their jobs, and more often than not, they end up actually limiting what audiences could see because they're picking and choosing little battles that don't really make sense. And just for a quick example before we get into the review, there's the movie called The Monuments Men, which George Clooney produced and starred in probably like 10 years ago, something like that. It was all about post-World War II hunting down all of these different stolen artifacts that the Nazis had stolen and trying to recover them so that they could go back into museums. More than anything, the film's pretty educational, and it's not overtly violent, and it's not anything that's like, wow, that's got to be PG-13 or something. But what does the movie get docked for? Historical smoking. Now, I get, yeah, we don't want to encourage kids to smoke cigarettes. Totally get it. And in a billion different ways, obviously that happens most places. I'm not a smoker myself, but I can attest to the fact that I don't really see many, or if there are very specific small places where they go to smoke. I'm like pretty much in public. That's almost not a thing, at least. I'll see people smoke in their car or whatever. I'm like, your life is your life, whatever. But for this movie to get docked for historical smoking, I feel like it just sounds silly. Like they're like, we got to warn you guys, like there's people smoking cigarettes, but you got to understand that they're only doing that is because it was actually what it was like back then. And we've got to warn you that, life was different. And there's a lot of other warnings that like Disney and other groups can place where they're like, yeah, depictions of slavery, of African Americans, of gay and lesbian people, the treatment of them in these films is not representative of what we think. It's of the time. Totally. I get those extra warnings for that, sensitivity warnings, whatever it is, just educationally, like, hey, we are not condoning this. This is just the film as it stands. Sort of come in and be like, hey, you guys got to watch out for the smoking here, It's just silly because you're limiting your audience again, because you're like, all right, well, we're going to say now this age range of people can't go see this because George Clooney and his company smoked a cigarette after recovering stolen Nazi artwork. Silly. So NC-17 basically means, yeah, you can't come in if you're 17 or younger. You got to be 18. You got to be an adult. That 1 year really makes a difference. But NC-17 is usually used if there are graphic sexual encounters, or I would say something that's just like overwhelmingly gory and something that you don't totally want to watch or is obviously not great to watch. So Passages falls into that first camp. And what we have is the story of Tomas, played by Franz Rogowski, who's married to Martin, played by Ben Whishaw, who's like love Ben Whishaw and have since Cloud Atlas. The two of them are husbands. Tomas is a film director, while his husband Martin does all sorts of different rock work, framing work, all sorts of. It's you spend a little time with him doing it, but by and large, the focus is on Tomas, who meets this young girl played by Adele Exarchopoulos, Aget. He finishes wrapping this movie. It's clear that, he and his husband, maybe things have been kind of rocky. He's like, oh, come dance with me. I don't want to dance with you, but this girl will dance with me. So fine, I'll go dance with her. And you're drinking, and then drinking leads to more touching. And eventually, it's like, oh, well, we're going to take the party home with some friends. We'll hang out. We'll do whatever. And then something happens when Tomas and Aget get home. They hook up. And not even just like hook up, but there is an undeniable chemistry that the two feel. And so after spending time exploring one another and their bodies and whatnot, we find ourselves in a really complicated place, because you're like, okay, Tomas, maybe he's like, wow, I've got a husband, but here I am having sex for the first time with a woman. And what a unique, new, and exciting experience this is. And so the first thing he does is he's like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to tell my husband, like, the craziest thing happened last night. I had sex with a woman, and it was pretty fun. And then it just, and it's interesting because it's clear the relationship they have. I'm not going to make any judgments or say like it's a very European relationship, in the sense that they're very casual about most things, whether it's sex or their dynamic or understanding, hey, we've been together however many years. Also, you're an artiste, you're a film director, so I know you get very passionate when you make your projects and when you do certain things. But, Martin thinks maybe, yeah, okay, tell me about it. Sure. You had sex with a woman, all right. And then he's like, okay, but you enjoyed it. Now I think I need to go, because this is very confusing and I don't know what this means. And so what starts is kind of this collapse almost of their relationship while Tomas is figuring things out with Aget. Ben Whishaw doesn't waste any time himself, though. I'm not going to say there were guys on the back burner, but you've got a young, handsome French black writer who's just published his first novel and has all this depth and intricacy to him. And so it's like, well, if my husband's now engaging in a relationship with a woman, I guess maybe I can do things too. And so things get very messy very quickly. And I won't go into much more detail than that, because truthfully, there's not too much more detail to go into. This is mostly it's like a 90-minute movie that moves, unfortunately, at a snail's pace. And even with your sexual escapades that happen in the film, and now granted, there are a couple different sex scenes, both with Aget and Tomas. You see Tomas and his husband have sex at one point. There's nothing that is, I say there's nothing overwhelmingly gratuitous. There's a lot of grunting and muffled moans and all sorts of stuff, sure. And you see a lot of leg and you'll see a lot of butt. But there was no graphic look at anybody's front parts, I should say. Which, I'm not saying it needed that. But again, you're like, okay. You're like, definitely, I don't want to say it's a French film, but it's like, okay, this is all right. This has been going on for like 5 minutes now. I'm like, making sure my windows are closed and the volume's down. I'm like, this is just, how much longer is this going to go on for? I'm like, I get there's love going on here and deeper connections, but it was a moment where, like a lot of people online, I would say a lot of younger people and younger generations have kind of complained about sex scenes in movies and their necessity. Or, do we really need to watch somebody have sex? Like, that's just weird. Why is this in the movie? Why did you make these two people have on-screen sex, And it's an interesting debate, because I'm sure I've sat through a number of movies where you're like, yeah, did this really need this? Does this only exist other than to give the unattractive guy a shot with the mega hottie who you're like, and never in a million years would this happen? But you're like, but it's a movie. I'm like, every comedy movie, there's always usually a bigger funny guy that ends up with a total smoke show or something. That's just their formula, because they're like, wouldn't it be hilarious if in this situation, like, you had sex with a nerdy fat guy or whatever, and they're like, that'd be so hilarious, right? Like, let's actually do it. And so there are times where I'm like, yeah, this isn't necessary. It's just like, maybe you really wanted to kiss that actress. I don't know. And like, didn't need it. But then there've been a number of films I've seen where it's like, whoa, the connection going on there is just dynamite. And you're like, did these two actors like date in real life? Because it feels like they would have had to after the on-screen chemistry they've had. So there are moments where maybe it plays a little more sensually rather than just like, we're going to show you vigorous sex or something. Because that, I feel like that always catches people off guards in a movie where you're like, they open the door and people are just going to town and you're like, whoa, what did we walk into? And maybe you're meant to feel like that person barging into the room and not knowing what's going on. But I don't know. I was like, passages, I was just like, yeah, you could have stopped this sex scene 30 seconds to a minute in, and it still would have, like, I would have understood what you were going for here. I don't think it really advanced the narrative all that much. All it does is really it earns yourself an NC-17, which, again, I'm like, you could just say it's rated R, but yes, there's strong graphic sex, whatever. I think the audience for this was already going to be fairly limited, but I don't know, man. For a 90-minute movie with sex in it and all sorts of other stuff, you're like, I'm sure there was a breeze, but it wasn't. It was just really slow moving. It felt like we just kind of went in the same kind of circles within the relationships or what people are feeling. And I'm going to go back to you or back to you or back to this. And I don't really know what's happening. And I just kind of, I don't know. I'm like, it's super minimalist. There's next to no soundtrack at all, which I know isn't totally bizarre for especially more of a dramatic film, especially when it's a foreign film. But I'm like, I would have used anything. Give me like a simple little rat-a-tat-tat on a drum or something to kind of give me a pulse or like give me a beat and keep me just engaged and energized in it. And it just wasn't. With Ben Whishaw and then Adele Exarchopoulos, who she really blew up some years back for Blue is the Warmest Color, another French film, a 3-hour lesbian drama with real sex between the actresses. Again, that was one where, at least in that film, even though the actresses themselves weren't lesbian, and there's a whole thing surrounding that movie and exploitation, perhaps, or certain things, but it's a story for another day. But in that film, at least it felt like, okay, these two are discovering love and there's passion in this, and maybe it is the idea that I don't know if people really ever show lesbian sex on screen that much. And so this was also at a time where we were getting more of an influx of LGBTQ films. But I don't know, at least in there, it felt more focused, at least, or it didn't feel like it was just like, let's just throw in this 5-minute sex scene, or like, I'm like, I don't know. Passages just did not work for me, unfortunately. I know it had played Sundance. I thought incorrectly that it had played Cannes, so I was like, I got to check this out because I'm always down to watch those foreign films that play over at the Cannes Film Festival. There's usually some great ones, but Passages did not play there, nor would it have played well there, I imagine. If you're interested in it, though, you can find it on the Mubi channel. I've got it through Apple TV Plus. That's where I found Decision to Leave, though, which is a much better foreign film. Should you go the Mubi route, I think you would be far more pleased with that. Or Blue is the Warmest Color, a better NC-17 French drama than this one. But what can you do? As always, if you want to stay tuned for new movie reviews and movie news, be sure to follow NT Movie Reviews on all social media networks, podcast platforms, and on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.